The marble felt cold beneath your feet that night. The wind off the Aegean sighed through olive branches, whispering secrets of a city that never truly slept. Somewhere, a lyre plucked softly behind a shuttered window, not for gods, but for a woman, whose name no one dared speak. You had walked through alleys, where lovers once knelt in sacrifice, where poets bled onto parchment, and where mothers prayed to Aphrodite with honey and strands of their own hair. Love, here, was not gentle. It was tangled in superstition, stitched with madness, and crowned in ritual. In this land of philosophers and war, people lit candles not just to find light, but to be seen by someone. Could you love so fiercely that reason ceased to matter? If this story opens a doorway in your heart, subscribe and wander with me through more forgotten lives. Love was not kindness, it was chaos. A force that transformed, a hunger that devoured. When the Greeks looked at love, they did not see candlelit rooms and soft-spoken words. They saw metamorphosis, possession, abduction, and sacrifice. They saw gods unable to resist their own creations. You sit beneath a cypress tree now, and it looms above you like the shadow of a divine mistake. To be loved by a god was not a blessing, it was a sentence. Yet mortals still prayed for it. They prayed at dawn with hands full of barley, and at dusk with tongues dipped in honeyed wine. They knelt at riverbanks and temple gates, at crossroads and shrines tucked beneath moss-draped rocks. Their prayers were not for safety, or even companionship. They begged for obsession, for the fever. Imagine a shepherd boy, his skin sun-darkened, and his lips stained from stolen grapes, looking up at the sky as thunder rolled. He does not flinch, he smiles. For in his village they say Zeus once loved a boy like him, Ganymede, lifted from the earth to pour wine for the gods. No one remembers what became of Ganymede's family, or if he wept when the clouds swallowed him, only that he was beautiful enough to be stolen. This too was love. You walk deeper into the grove. The earth smells of salt and pine resin, and something older, the breath of stones. You pass a statue worn smooth by centuries of rain, its face half erased, its mouth still parted in marble, longing. Perhaps it was a goddess, perhaps a man immortalized for his beauty. Or perhaps it is nameless, like so many lovers whose stories slipped through the cracks of time. But even in silence, it remembers desire. In myth, love gave birth to monsters, to wars, to oceans. Aphrodite, the goddess of love herself, rose not from the soil or the womb, but from the sea foam churned by a god's severed flesh. Her very birth was a wound. Her laughter was a blade, and still they worshipped her, in marble sanctuaries, in blood-slick altars, in the quiet ache of unspoken longing. She was called Philomydes, laughter-loving, though none who loved her ever laughed for long. You picture a woman, nameless like so many, kneeling in a temple's shade. She's too young to know the weight of her request, yet she offers it anyway, a lock of hair, cut with trembling hands. She prays not for a husband, not for wealth, but to be loved the way myths promised, fiercely, unreasonably, eternally. She leaves with a flower tucked into a tunic, petals already wilting in the heat. These ancient prayers still cling to the olive trees. You can almost hear them. They ask not for balance, but for fire. And you wonder, if the gods themselves were never spared, what chance did mortals have? The firelight from a nearby hearth flickers against the white stone. Somewhere in the distance, a lyre trembles through the night air, the melody sweet and cruel. Perhaps a poet sings of love tonight, but the words are not soft. They are sharpened like bronze. In this world, to love was to enter a war with fate, to stand at the edge of a cliff and whisper to the sea, "Take me," and it always did. So remember this, as you drift towards sleep. The Greeks did not see love as comfort, they saw it as transformation, a divine disorder, a thing that turned gods into beasts and mortals into stars. And somewhere, even now, beneath stone and silence, that longing still pulses, waiting to rise. If this story lingers in your heart like the scent of myrrh on temple steps, share it with someone who still believes in fire. What story of ancient love speaks loudest to you, the thunder or the silence that followed it? It begins with silence, the kind that drapes itself over early morning like a woolen shroud, not the silence of sleep, but of waiting, You walk the stone paths of Delphi long before the sun touches the mountains, your sandals pressing softly into the earth, each step uncertain and slow. The air is cool but dry, scented with crushed laurel leaves and last night's ash. The temple looms above you, veiled in shadows, its columns rising like pale ribs from the spine of the earth. Inside, the god watches. Eros does not smile. He never has. His statue stands alone near the temple's heart, carved of smooth Parian marble, wings curling against his back like smoke trapped in stone. His eyes are empty, though they stare directly at you. Around his pedestal lie the remnants of countless offerings, pomegranates cracked open, garlands dried and brittle, small clay figures with arms outstretched in hope or despair. You add yours quietly, 3 rose petals from the garden your husband planted, 1 fig still warm from the morning sun, and your own breath released with trembling reverence. They never do. You remember the story of Medea, how Eros struck her with his unseen arrow, and her love for Jason became a storm that drowned her sanity. Her passion burned away her homeland, her brother, even her children. Still, people came. Still, you came. Because grief is a kind of emptiness that begs to be filled. And love, even in madness, even in peril, feels better than silence. Behind you, a priest murmurs a chant under his breath, but you do not turn. Your eyes stay fixed on the god who never weeps. You whisper your husband's name, once, twice, again, as if the repetition could summon him back, as if memory bound tightly enough could become resurrection. The statue does not answer, but something in the air shifts. It's subtle, a coolness that wasn't there before, a rustle though the laurel branches are still. You feel your breath catch, your spine straighten, a presence, not seen, not named, but felt. It brushes the edge of your skin like the memory of a kiss. And in that moment, your sorrow changes shape. It no longer feels like mourning, it feels like yearning. The kind that stains dreams and blurs the line between what is gone and what might return. You begin to see him, not the statue but your husband, in the shadows near the pillars, in the smoke from the altar flame, in the blur of torchlight that dances along the wall. He is smiling. Or perhaps you only imagine it, but it is enough. You fall to your knees, not out of reverence, but collapse, because the ache in your chest no longer feels sharp. It feels full. Days pass, then weeks, and still, you return. The priest begins to worry. He says nothing, but his glances linger. You stay longer each time. Speak aloud less. Bring no offerings but your presence. You dream more vividly. You wake in the night, certain he was there, at your bedside, humming the song he used to sing while tending the vines. Others begin to notice. They whisper behind doorways. A healer is summoned. They call it hysteria. They say you are sick with sorrow, but you know better. You are in love again, with a ghost, with something, someone who does not breathe but listens. You think of the story of Iphigenia, who was to be sacrificed to calm the sea winds, and how her mother clawed at the temple gates, cursing the gods who demanded love as payment. You think of how desire and death were never separate, how the same flame that lit the marriage pyre also warmed the tomb. In the end, you stop speaking. The words no longer matter. You live in your dreams, in that thin space between what was and what might still be. The priestess leaves food outside your home. Children avoid your shadow, but you do not feel alone, because every night you walk once more to the temple. Every night you see him, and every night the god watches, unblinking, because Eros does not leave once he's entered a heart. He remains, patient, relentless, and cruel. And in that cruelness, somehow you find peace. For some, love is a blessing. For others, it is a possession. And for you, it is both. If this story touched something quiet and aching within you, share it gently with someone who understands the silence after love. Could you love someone so deeply that even death could not convince you to let go? The cave is cold tonight. Not with winter's breath, but with the stillness of places the sun no longer touches. You crouch low, your palms pressing into the earth, made damp with ancient silence. Your fingers tremble slightly as you unroll the thin strip of lead, cool as moonlit metal. The stylus is simple, just a sharpened sliver of bone, but in your hands it becomes something sacred, or perhaps something dangerous. You scratch the name into the surface. One letter, then the next. The sound is faint, like a whisper carved in stone. You do not dare speak aloud, but the words are clear in your mind. Bind him, blind him, bring him to me. His name is Theron. He once smiled at you, only once, in the marketplace, when you dropped your figs, and he stooped to gather them. His hand brushed yours. He laughed. And then, nothing. Days passed. Weeks. He never looked again, never asked your name. His attention vanished like dew on morning stone. And yet, your heart never settled back into its chest. It lingered in that half-second of warmth, of hope. And now you're here, in this cave, doing what the elders warned against. The Greeks called them katadasmoi, binding spells. Not the art of philosophers or priests, but the desperate rituals of bakers, midwives, and lonely hearts. The kind of spells written not in grandeur, but in hunger, on scraps of lead rolled tightly, pierced with bronze nails, wrapped around dolls made of clay and straw, then buried in graves or thrown into wells, where spirits were believed to walk most freely. You wrap the strip tightly now, curling it into a coil like a sleeping snake. You whisper his name again, and then your own. This is not hate. This is hope, twisted and bruised and hidden beneath your fingernails. But hope all the same. You brought more than the lead. There is a lock of your hair knotted and still wet with tears. A sliver of wax carved into a figure that, in some small trembling part of your heart, you pretend is him. You place it all into a shallow hollow in the earth and cover it with soil, slow and deliberate, as if planting something you pray will bloom in darkness. No one teaches you this. You learn from overheard stories, from the whispers in the dye houses, from the crone who sells herbs outside the temple, from the soft sighs of girls leaning against doorways when no one is watching. You learn because your heart refuses to forget, because love, in this city of wisdom, is not always rational. It is not always kind. And so, you bury your spell, and you wait. Days pass. You pass him again in the marketplace. He looks your way. You do not breathe. His eyes linger for only a moment, a heartbeat stretched into eternity, and then he moves on. But it was a glance, a hesitation, enough to make you return to the cave. You make another offering, this time, not with desperation but with belief. You are not alone, not in your wronging, not in your rituals. Beneath Athens, dozens, perhaps hundreds of spells lie buried, in graves, in wells, in cracks in the foundation stones of temples. Men wishing for women, women aching for men, slaves begging to be seen, merchants wanting their rivals to lose favor, lovers desperate to reclaim what was lost or never truly theirs. Some of the spells survive even now. They read like poetry soaked in grief. As this lead is cold, so let his affections grow numb. Let her dream only of me. Let no food pass her lips, until my name does. As the corpse cannot rise, let him not find rest until he returns to me. They are not wicked. They are wounded, and in that wound, you find yourself. One night, you dream of him. He stands at your door, flowers in hand, eyes soft and searching. You wake with a gasp, tangled in sweat and sheets. The air is thick, and you swear for one wild, impossible second that you can still smell the time on his skin. The spell did something, or perhaps it didn't. Perhaps it is only your own longing, growing legs and wings in the silence. But belief is a powerful thing. In this city of philosophers and mathematicians, belief still coils in alleyways, waiting for a lonely soul to pick up the pen and write a name into lead. You never speak of the cave again. Not to your mother, not to the neighbor girl who once shared bread with you. Some things are too private to confess, too sacred, or too strange. But you return, from time to time, not to cast another spell, but to remember, to feel the cold of the earth, to press your ear to the silence. And sometimes, you bring no offerings at all, just the echo of a name you can't let go of. Because love, when unanswered, does not vanish. It lingers, it festers, it writes itself into the bones of the earth, and sometimes it waits to be found. If this story stirred some hidden ache within you, let it settle gently in your heart, or share it with one who has ever whispered a name into the dark. What would you bury in the earth, if it meant your longing might bloom? At dawn, the city begins to hum, not with the clang of tools or the barter of fishmongers, but with flutes, rising soft and slow through the waking streets. You open your shutters and breathe in the sweet, heady air of myrtle blossoms, strewn across the cobblestones, like blessings. The aphrodisia has come, and for these few sacred days, Athens forgets its armor. You step out into the golden light, feet bare, robes loosened. Already the crowds are forming. Children with olive wreaths on their heads, women with unbraided hair, men wearing tunics stitched in purple thread, all moving together like a river of color through the city's heart. The air smells of honey cakes, crushed petals, warm bodies, and the faintest trace of sacred fire. The aphrodisia is no ordinary feast. It is not merely gratitude, it is surrender. A moment each year when the people of Athens lay down their reason, their judgments, and their pride, to remember what it feels like to ache, to desire, to give in. You follow the current of the crowd toward the temple. Along the way, you pass altars blooming with fruit and birdsong, and balconies where women cast handfuls of barley over passing lovers. Perfumed water trickles down marble fountains carved in the goddess's image. Aphrodite, the laughter-loving, the irresistible, the merciless, her lips are parted in stone, as if forever about to speak your name. You do not come here to be seen. You come because you cannot not. Something inside you has grown tight with the turning seasons. A longing, a hunger, not for food, but for closeness, for nearness of soul. And in this city, where philosophy rules the tongue, today it is the body that rules the heart. The procession begins. At its head, priestesses in linen robes move like wind across sand, holding torches lit from Aphrodite's eternal flame. They sing, but not in voices of melody. Their chant is breath, long, trembling, wordless, like the voice of desire itself. Behind them come dancers, swirling and barefoot, painted with symbols of doves and waves, hips swaying in slow rhythm. They do not dance for spectacle, they dance for memory. Then comes the crowd. And among them you. You do not know where you are going, but that has never mattered during the aphrodisia. This is not a festival of logic. It is a tide. It carries you past doorways where lovers press each other against stone walls, where old men clutch faded lockets and cry without shame, where widows scatter rose petals into wells and whisper names that never returned from war. As the sun rises high, the city shifts. Stalls are abandoned. The agora is quiet. Even the philosophers pause. Love has taken the street. By midday, the great temple fills. Inside, the statue of Aphrodite glows with gold leaf and candlelight, draped in new robes spun with threads dyed from crushed snails, a color more precious than silver. At her feet lie dozens of offerings, mirrors, carved combs, sprigs of mint, strands of hair, tokens from lovers both present and gone. You do not approach the altar. Not yet. You find a corner in the shadows, and there you wait. You watch others come forward, a young couple, too nervous to touch, their fingers brushing only as they kneel. An old woman, her back bent, holding a withered rose she's carried every year since he died. A boy, silent and alone, pressing a single coin to the ground as if it holds every secret his tongue cannot bear to tell. And then, you see him. Not at the altar, but in the far doorway, the scribe. You've known his name only in passing. He works by candlelight in the magistrate's hall, his fingers ink-stained and his face unreadable. But today he wears no mark of duty, only a simple tunic, and eyes that scan the room as if searching for something he lost long ago.
Your eyes meet.
And for the briefest flicker, the world softens. But it is fleeting. He turns away, vanishing into the gathering like a wave into the sea. You say nothing. You feel everything. As dusk approaches, the city blooms again. Fires are lit. Food is shared without question. Wine flows. Laughter rises. But it is not the laughter of revelry. It is the laughter of surrender, the kind that comes when one stops resisting. Women sing hymns in the nude, their voices rising with smoke into the heavens, calling the goddess not as a mother, nor as a protector, but as a mirror of their own yearning. You return home in silence, your feet dusty, your throat dry, but your heart, somehow, has changed shape, not filled, not healed, but softened, like wax warmed by the sun. Later, long after the chants have faded and the city has begun to dream, you open your window to the night. you think of the scribe, of his eyes, of how, in that one moment, you were seen, not known, not held, but seen. And in a world that moves too fast and hides too much, that is its own kind of love. Tomorrow, the city will put its armor back on, the philosophers will return, the magistrates will rule, but for now, just for now, Athens has remembered how to, and so have you. If this moment brought warmth or sorrow to your chest, pass it on like a hymn to someone who's ever walked through a crowd hoping to be seen. What would you surrender, if it meant being known, even for a moment? The wind on Lesbos carries something different. It is not harsh, like the Athenian gales that scour rooftops and rattle shutters. No, here it is warm, almost shy, moving gently through the lemon groves, lifting the hem of your tunic like a curious hand. You step off the small boat, your sandals sinking slightly into the damp sand. Ahead lies the island of Sappho, a place where love once wore a woman's voice and sang itself into memory. You are young, barely more than a girl, and yet your soul feels heavy with thoughts you have no names for. You've come to the school not to learn arithmetic or philosophy, but something older, something deeper. You've come to learn how to speak your longing aloud. The school is quiet, nestled among flowering trees on a hillside where bees hover over time, and the sea glistens like spilled oil below. The women here move slowly. They do not shout, they do not hurry. They read in the afternoons, write verses on slates, and sit beneath fig trees spinning tales out of silence. There is no need for pretension here. Everyone carries something unspoken. Then she enters. Sappho. Her presence does not announce itself. She walks like a thought. Her robes are plain, her hair unadorned, her eyes half closed as if always listening to some secret rhythm the rest of the world cannot hear. But when she speaks, the air stills. Her voice is not loud, it's soft, like water pouring into clay, gentle, steady, inescapable. She does not speak of gods or duty. She speaks of her, of the way her laugh scattered stars across the night sky, of the sound of her sandals on the tiles, of the unbearable sweetness of skin, barely brushed by another's hand. She does not call it lust. She does not call it shame. She calls it love, and you finally understand that what you've carried inside yourself is not a curse. It is a song. You learn to write your name beside another's, not with ink, but with trembling. You learn that desire can be a form of praise, that heartbreak can be holy. The verses you craft are simple, just a few lines carved into wax tablets, but they hold more truth than anything you've been taught in temple halls. One day, you see her, the girl with copper hair who tends the olives. You do not speak. You don't have to. The glance is enough. The breath caught in your throat is enough. That night, you write, and when you show the poem to Sappho, she smiles, not as a teacher but as a witness. You begin to understand what makes this island different. Here, women love in ways they are not allowed to elsewhere. They braid each other's hair not just for beauty, but to feel close. They linger in bathhouses long after the water cools. They whisper poems to each other by lamplight, never knowing if those words will be answered or remembered. But it does not matter. Love is not always about return. Sometimes it is about the saying. Yet, even paradise holds shadows. Whispers rise from the mainland, from the priests, from families who do not understand. They say the school corrupts women, that Sappho's poetry is unnatural, that this island must be corrected. Soon students begin to leave. Some are summoned home, others vanish without goodbye. The copper-haired girl does not come to the olive grove anymore. One morning, Sappho does not rise. She stays in her room, her eyes fixed on the sea. Her hand clenches a scrap of parchment, a poem no one will ever read. The others grow quiet. The laughter softens. A silence settles, heavy as mist. The island feels smaller. Then, one day, you return to the hillside alone. The fig trees rustle softly. Bees hum, indifferent to human sorrow. You sit where she once sat, your hands empty, and you write. Not to forget, but to keep her here. The world will misremember Sappho. It will call her names. It will reduce her fire to fragments. But you know better. You walked beside her. You heard the truth in her voice. You know that her verses were not weakness, but defiance. In a world that buried love beneath laws and silence, She dared to let it speak. And you carry her fire forward. Even as the school fades, even as the island changes, even as time carves out the memory like waves gnawing at stone, her words remain, etched not on monuments but on hearts. Someone, I tell you in another time, will remember us. The wind stirs again, lifting your hair, brushing your cheek. You close your eyes, and for just a moment, you hear her laugh. If this story echoes in your chest like a poem half remembered, share it with someone whose name deserves to be sung. Have you ever loved in silence? Not because you had to, but because it was the only way it could survive. You carry the wreath in both hands, gently, reverently, as if it might fall apart at the slightest breath of wind. The petals of the hyacinth have already begun to curl, not from age, but from the salt of your palms. Still, you walk slowly, as one does when approaching something sacred, or something that hurts. The necropolis lies just beyond the city walls, where the land tilts down toward the sea. It is not a place of fear here in Athens. Not exactly. Death walks close to the living, but not as a stranger. You pass rows of carved steles, each one a face remembered, a name spoken once, and then 1,000 times in whisper. The scent of incense clings to the air like a ghost that never left. You stop before his stone. It's worn now, the chisel marks softened by years of rain and grief. His name is still visible, though the last few letters blur. Beside it, carved low and with less care, is yours, not as the deceased, but as the one who mourns. That was your request. You wanted the stone to remember that you had belonged to him, and he to you. You kneel. The earth here is soft, cool. You place the wreath down slowly, your fingers brushing the base of the stone, where moss has begun to grow. He never liked hyacinths, said they smelled like the coming of rain, but they were the only flowers that survived the drought this year, so you brought them anyway. Because you still bring something every week. A wreath, a fig, a fragment of honeycomb. Sometimes just a strand of your own hair, tied in a knot and left beneath the roots. Not as offering, not exactly, but as memory. You speak aloud sometimes, though your voice falters more now. You tell him the goat gave birth, that the neighbor's child lost her first tooth, that the roof finally gave in last month, and you had to sleep beneath a leaking sky. You say these things because they are real, and because he is not. But he still listens. You feel it, not in the way your neighbors do, not in dreams, or voices, or omens, but in the steadiness of the earth beneath your knees, in the pause between heartbeats, in the breath that catches when you whisper his name. You are not alone here. A woman nearby hums as she pours oil over a low grave. A boy, barely old enough to walk, toddles between the steles holding a basket of olives. His mother trails behind, her fingers stained with ash. Further down, a man weeps into his cloak, holding a broken lyre against his chest, like a rib torn loose. These are not strangers, these are your kin, bound not by blood, but by the ache of what once was. In Greece, the dead are not silent. They are fed, washed, sung to. Their names are spoken at festivals. Their stories are told beside fires. To forget is not only loss, it is insult. You were taught from girlhood that love continues long after breath has gone, that the underworld is not some far-off place of judgment, but a mirror, a place where the ones you've loved wait to be remembered. You light the small lamp you brought with you, olive oil, a tiny wick. The flame dances, wavering in the breeze, not strong enough to warm, but enough to be seen, enough to say, I am still here. You do not cry. You did, once, loudly, sharply, like a bird with its wings torn out. But grief changes. It no longer claws. It settles, becomes a rhythm, a ritual, a part of your shadow. Still, some nights when the wind is right and the house is too quiet, you imagine his hand reaching for yours in the dark. You feel the space he once filled beside you, the pressure on the mattress, the breath at your neck. And once, only once, you swear you heard the lyre, the one he played on warm evenings, when the figs were ripe and the moon hung low over the hills. You heard it faintly, just a few notes, then nothing. Perhaps it was the breeze, perhaps memory, or perhaps he simply missed you too. As you rise to leave, you touch the stone again. The moss is wet beneath your fingers. You press your lips to it, not gently, but firmly. as if trying to leave something of yourself behind, something more than flowers, because in this place, love does not end. It changes shape. It becomes offering, gesture, silence. It becomes a wreath made of petals that wilt too soon, and still, you bring them. If this story lingered in your chest like a name you still whisper, share it with someone who's ever spoken to the wind and hoped it carried their words. When love outlives the body, what remains of us? The room is lit by a single flame. It flickers inside a shallow bronze dish, its glow painting soft lines along the marble. You sit alone, a cloth in your lap, fingertips stained with olive oil and powdered rose petals. Slowly, carefully, you wipe the face before you. Cheek, brow, lips that have never spoken, eyes that have never blinked. Yet every evening you greet him as if he had simply stepped out and returned again with dusk. He is perfect, too perfect. You remember the day you found him, in the sculptor's garden, forgotten beneath a blanket, chipped but whole. A cast-off from a patron who had changed his mind, claimed the figure was too plain. But you saw something else, beneath the dust, beneath the silence, was a face that stole the breath from your chest. Not for its beauty, though it was beautiful, but for something more elusive. Familiarity, recognition, as if some fragment of your soul had once lived behind those carved eyes. You paid for him in coin and linen. The sculptor laughed. He had never seen anyone so insistent. He said statues were cold things, decorative, silent. But you took him home anyway. And there, in the corner of your room, beneath the laurel branches and beside your bed, he became more than stone. He became yours. In daylight, he watches. At night, he listens. You speak aloud, at first shyly, then without hesitation. You tell him of your work, of the foolishness of the market, of the girl down the street who married too young and cries behind shutters. You ask him what he thinks of the weather, of your new tunic, of the dream you had where he reached for your hand and led you to the sea. He never answers, but you hear him anyway. Some would call it madness, but the Greeks know better. They remember Pygmalion, the sculptor who carved a woman so beautiful he fell in love with her, who dressed her, kissed her, wept before her, until Aphrodite, moved by the depth of his longing, gave her breath, flesh, warmth. They became myth, proof that love, even when misplaced, might be rewarded. You wonder if Aphrodite watches you now. If she finds your devotion amusing or pitiable. You wonder if, one morning, your statue might open his eyes, but he does not. Still, you do not stop. Each evening, you anoint him with oil. You dress him in garlands. On feast days, you prepare a second plate and set it before him. You sing old hymns as you sweep the floor, pretending he hears you. When storms rage outside and thunder shakes the shutters, you wrap a shawl around his shoulders. You do not weep anymore. Not like before. Not since you found him. He does not betray. He does not leave. He does not age. He loves you exactly as you are. Or at least, he never tells you otherwise. And isn't that what so many long for? You remember the sculptor's final words. He called the figure lifeless, incomplete. But he was wrong. It is not the beating heart that makes something alive. It is presence, attention, the way you lose yourself in its nearness. In that way, this statue is more alive than any man who ever looked at you and failed to see. One night you hear footsteps outside, a visitor. The door creaks open. A neighbor steps in, searching for you. She sees the statue, sees the oil, the flowers. She says nothing, just nods once and leaves. You do not explain. You owe her nothing. What lives here is yours, sacred. Still, sometimes you wonder, if the statue could speak, what would he say? Would he thank you? Would he run? Would he tell you that he has waited longer than you have in silence, in dust, for someone to look at him, not as marble, but as man? But these are questions best left unanswered. Because in truth, you do not need him to speak. You need him to stay, to remain as he is, silent, steady, whole. Love, in its strangest form, does not always seek reciprocation. Sometimes it seeks reflection, and in his stillness, you see yourself more clearly than you ever have before. If this story stirred the soft spaces between loneliness and reverence, share it with someone who's ever given their heart to silence. Have you ever loved something that could not love you back? and did it matter? You sit at the edge of the world, where the breath of the gods rises through cracks in the earth. The temple of Apollo looms behind you, carved into the mountainside like a question too sacred to be spoken. Cypress trees stand sentinel above the cliffs, their spines stiff against the wind. Below, the valley stretches wide, draped in olive groves and silence. But here, where you kneel, silence has weight. Meaning, you are Pythia, oracle of Delphi, and for the first time in days, you are alone. They come to you in endless procession, kings, farmers, lovers, merchants. They bring honey cakes and bronze coins, lambs and garlands, songs and promises. They come not to see you, but to hear through you, to know what the gods intend. You sit on the tripod above the sacred fissure, inhale the vapors, and speak in riddles. You tell them what they want, or what they fear, or what the gods choose to reveal. But long before you were Pythia, you were just a girl, and he loved you. His name was Theon, a name as common as rain, but to you it was a temple. He came with figs tucked into his satchel, dirt beneath his nails, and stories of stars that moved like dancers. You remember the way he listened, not just with his ears, but with his whole body, as if every word you said might vanish if he didn't catch it in time. He loved you when your name was still your own, before it became an echo, a title. He asked you to come away, to leave the temple walls, to forget the laurel crown and the sacred spring and the endless, aching chants. He did not want prophecy. He wanted you, barefoot, laughing, singing old songs beside the fire. And for a breath, for a heartbeat, you nearly said yes. But the gods had already chosen. You do not remember the moment you changed. Not exactly. It was not a single vow or a single night. It was 1,000 small silences, 1,000 steps taken toward the altar instead of away. One morning, you woke and found the world quieter. Your thoughts farther from yourself, your words no longer yours. You became the vessel, and in the stillness of the shrine, you began to forget your name. But you remembered his. He returned once, stood in the shadow of the columns, his eyes hollow with distance. He asked for a prophecy. He did not look at you, not directly, but his hands trembled. His breath was uneven. You spoke as you always did. Riddles, images, warnings, nothing more. And when he turned to go, he left behind a single fig, half rotten, split open with sweetness. You placed it on the altar. Let it wither. Let it become part of the shrine. That night, you dreamt of him, not in sorrow, but in because love, true love, does not always claim. Sometimes it releases. There were others, of course. Suitors who mistook your silence for invitation. Pilgrims who wrote your name into the margins of their prayers. A priest who once touched your arm too long beneath the laurel tree. You turned them all away. Not with cruelty, with stillness. The god had filled you. And there was no room left for anyone else. You have heard the stories of women stolen from their vows, of priestesses dragged into dark corners and stripped of their sacredness. But not you. There is something in your eyes that stops men from moving forward. Something cold, eternal. They know, without words, that you are not theirs to touch. You do not pity them. You pity yourself. Sometimes, late at night, when the cave is empty and the stars press too heavily against the roof of the sky, you wonder what it would have felt like to choose softness over duty, to taste honey from a lover's lip instead of offering it to gods who never eat, to lie in arms that shake not from ecstasy but from fear of losing you. But then the wind stirs, and the voices return, not loud, not cruel, just there, like breath, like tide. You rise. You prepare the altar. You braid your hair with laurel and myrrh. You take your place on the tripod. Because in the end, love is not always desire. Sometimes, love is silence. Sometimes, love is saying no. If this story brushed a quiet corner of your soul, offer it to someone who once chose the sacred over the safe. Have you ever turned away from love? Not because you didn't feel it, but because something deeper called your name. The door creaks open with a sound like an old breath, and the scent hits you first, sharp, clinging, almost sweet. A mixture of crushed pomegranate seeds, bitter fennel, powdered root, and something darker beneath. You hesitate, then step inside, pulling your cloak tighter. The shop is dim, lit only by a single oil lamp that flickers in time with your pulse. Shelves line the walls, overflowing with vials and dried herbs, jars filled with liquids that shimmer gold, green, or blood red. She sits behind the counter, grinding something in a stone bowl, with the slow, deliberate rhythm of someone who knows time bends differently in this place. Her fingers are stained black at the tips, her eyes cloudy but sharp. They do not blink when she looks up. "You've come for him," she says. You don't answer. She doesn't need you to. This is how it begins, not with passion, or even hope, but with need. A need that presses behind the eyes, that makes food taste dull and sleep ache like a wound. You whisper his name. She nods once, says nothing, and begins to gather. In Athens, these women have many names. Pharmakis, witch, wise one, poisoner. It depends on the outcome, on whether love blooms or curdles, on whether the one you seek returns your longing, or turns mad beneath the weight of your desire. You do not think of that now. You think only of his voice, the way he laughed that once, the way he looked past you at the market stall, never knowing your name. You want to be seen, held, consumed. If it must be through trickery, then so be it. The gods have never played fair. She hands you a vial, the size of your thumb, its contents dark as garnet. Add it to his wine, she says. Before the moon rises, only a drop. Her voice is dry as withered time. No more. You nod. You do not ask what happens if you use too much. You do not ask what's inside. The vial is warm in your palm. You cradle it like a heartbeat. That night, you follow him. He sits at the taverna with his friends, pouring wine from a cracked jug, laughter slurring his words. You wait until he rises, leaves his cup unattended, just for a moment. You move quickly. A single drop, no more. The wine darkens, then clears. No one sees you. You return to your seat. Wait. And then he looks at you. Not past you. At you. His eyes soften. He rises. He crosses the room. His voice, when he speaks, is lower than you remembered. Warmer. He asks your name. You tell him. He smiles. And just like that, it begins. The days blur. He visits you now, brings figs, speaks poetry he does not understand, holds you too tightly, stares at you too long. His hands tremble when you pull away. At first, you believe it is love. Then you start to wonder. He forgets his sister's name, stares at walls as if they whisper. He wakes in the night crying for someone else. Not you, a name you don't recognize. He begins to sweat, even in the cold. He stops eating. He follows you. Everywhere. You return to the shop. She says nothing. Only looks at you as if she's seen it all before. You drop the vial onto the table. I only used a drop. She shrugs. Some hearts are more fragile. You want to scream. You want to ask for a cure. But you know better. There are no cures for what was never natural to begin with. There were others, too. A wife who wanted her husband's desire back. A merchant who poisoned his rival's lover so he could step in as comfort. A girl who brewed a tea with crushed petals and owl's blood, who drank it herself, hoping it would make her beautiful enough to be loved. She died in her sleep, dreaming of lips that never touched hers. The line between medicine and magic was always thin. The line between longing and cruelty thinner still. You leave the shop and never return. You try to end things gently. But he doesn't understand. He follows, cries, begs. He no longer remembers where you met, only that he cannot breathe without you. You move to the countryside. He stops appearing. You never ask what happened to him. Some nights, you still hear his voice. In dreams. In wind. Not the voice he had, but the one he should have had. The one untouched by the vial, the spell, the wanting. You wonder what might have grown between you, if you had waited. If you had let love come on its own, if it would have come at all. But in ancient Greece, love was not patient. It was taken, brewed, stolen, and sometimes it was poison. If this story left a bitter taste at the back of your tongue, share it with someone who's ever wanted something too much. When does longing become harm? And would you have known the moment you crossed the line? The sun has not yet risen, but already the air tastes of iron. The scent of sweat and leather hangs thick between tents. You stand alone at the edge of the field, adjusting the bronze strap across your chest. the weight of the spear against your palm as familiar as breath. You do not pray, you do not speak. Your eyes are on him. He sleeps beneath an olive tree, head tilted back, mouth slightly open. His cloak is pulled over his shoulder, revealing the curve of his neck, the faint pulse beneath. You have watched that pulse for days, for months, since the moment he joined the ranks beside you, unblooded but proud. All angles and heat and laughter like sunlight breaking across marble. His name is Lysandros, and you love him. You never said the words aloud. In the barracks, such things are spoken in glances, in bruises shared, in silence that stretches between two bodies on cold stone. But in Thebes, you are not alone. The sacred band was formed for this very reason, to pair lovers in arms, so that no man would flee battle if it meant leaving his beloved behind. And so they placed you together, gave you spears, tunics, iron, gave you a reason to stand firm when the enemy charged. They said, let love be your shield. In the beginning, it was enough to stand beside him, to watch his back as he moved through drills, his form clean and fluid, like water held in muscle. At night, you shared bread, joked over the fire. He told you stories about his sister's garden, about a dog he once raised from a pup. You listened, laughing softly, drinking the words like wine. Then came the war, skirmishes, patrols, blood that pooled too warm and too fast. You stood side by side, lungs raw, your shield dented, your hand shaking with the memory of a blade passing too near. He did not falter. He never did. And that night, when the stars blinked like tears above you, he touched your arm and did not pull away. He did not speak. He did not have to. You remember the first time he kissed you. It was not soft. It was not sweet. It was desperate. A breath stolen between battles. A moment torn from the jaws of death. You clung to him as if your body could remember what peace once felt like. And when it ended, you did not weep. You simply leaned your forehead to his and breathed. Now, as the morning grows light, you prepare again. The enemy waits across the field, their standards high, their shields polished to reflect the rising sun. Today there will be blood. You know this. You have tasted it before. But something inside you has shifted. Today, you do not fear dying. You fear watching him die. You tighten your grip. Your heart beats faster. You glance toward him again, and find his eyes already on you. Awake, watching, no words. Just the look that says, if we must fall, let it be together. The horn sounds. You form ranks. The air thickens with dust and silence. Shields rise. The ground beneath your feet feels suddenly alive, pulsing with the rhythm of marching boots. You stand shoulder to shoulder, your bodies close enough that your arms touch. You feel his warmth. The charge comes. Time bends. Screams rise. Steel clashes. You move as you've trained. Your movements automatic, the world reduced to light and impact, and the sound of your own breath rasping through your throat. He is beside you, and then he is not. You turn too late. He stumbles. A spear pierces the air, and you step into its path. Pain floods your body, white hot and pure. But you do not fall. You hold your shield. You push forward. You scream his name. You do not remember the rest. You lie side by side in the medic's tent, bound in linen and silence. He reaches for your hand. You take it. They say the sacred band of Thebes was the fiercest unit ever formed. Not because of training, not because of strategy, because each man fought, not for country, but for the one he could not bear to lose. If this story carved something raw and noble into your heart, pass it along to someone you'd protect even in the darkest hour. The courtroom is small, humble, lit by the sharp angle of the sun through a single high window, casting shadows across the packed floor. You stand near the wall, pressed among a crowd that smells of sweat, dust, and tension. The room breathes in unison, shallow, uneven. No one speaks, not yet. All eyes are on the magistrate's chair, and on the man seated below it, his head bowed, fingers wrapped tightly around a faded blue sash. This is not a trial of theft, not a murder, not a dispute over land or inheritance. This is a trial about love. You never thought you'd see such a thing. Desire placed beneath the weight of civic order, longing rendered into evidence. But here you are, listening to a man accused not of violence but of seduction. The servant in question does not speak. She sits behind a woven screen, veiled, her presence acknowledged, but not invited. She is both witness and woe. The magistrate calls for silence. The charges are read, and suddenly the air in the room becomes something else, heavy, sharpened, almost sacred. Because here in Athens, love is not just personal, it is political. To seduce a free woman without a marriage contract is a crime. To take a slave as lover without consent is an offense. To cross the lines of class, gender, or station in the name of affection is to invite the city's judgment. And yet, people do it every day. In corners, in shadows, in whispered letters and glances exchanged over stone fountains. Love, for all its risks, continues. The testimony begins. Thalos speaks with fire in his voice, outrage in every word. He paints Dorian as a manipulator, a corrupter, a viper in silk. He reads from a letter, found, he claims, beneath the servant's mattress. The words are soft, aching, written in a script not used for ledgers but for songs. If I could be the air you breathe, I would never leave you. The courtroom murmurs. Dorian does not deny it. He stands, speaks low but clear. He does not defend himself with logic. He speaks of love, of truth, of how the girl, no, the woman, looked at him once beneath the laurel tree and changed everything. He says he meant no harm, that he gave her nothing but words, that he only wanted to be close to her, to matter. The magistrate is unmoved. The law is not a poet. You feel the room shift. Not against him, not for him, just away from him, as if no one wants to touch the heat he's carrying. He is dangerous now, not because he's violent, but because he's broken something sacred, the illusion that affection lives neatly within rules. Outside, Athens buzzes with philosophy, democracy, debate. But in here, love is being measured, weighed, judged. The verdict is swift. He is fined. Stripped of public standing, forbidden from performing in the agora, not imprisoned, but silenced, punished, not for what he did, but for who he dared to want. He leaves the court through a back door, shoulders squared, but you can see it in his eyes, not anger, not shame, grief. Later, you hear rumors that the woman was sold, that she was sent away by Thalos to a cousin in Aegina, that she never saw Dorian again. But you don't know what's true, only that the flute no longer plays in the courtyards, only that the love that bloomed beneath the laurel tree now lies buried beneath courtroom dust. And you wonder, how many others stand trial in ways unseen? How many silences are carried like verdicts? How often does the heart get summoned as witness to its own undoing? In ancient Greece, the laws sought to contain love. But love, unruly, strange, human, has never respected lines drawn in ink. If this story tightened your chest like a sentence unspoken, pass it to someone who understands how the world can punish the heart for beating out of time. If your love broke the law, would you speak it aloud anyway? The paper is fragile, papyrus, softened by the damp breath of the sea. You fold it with care, smoothing each crease with your thumb, the ink still faintly smudging where your fingers linger too long. Outside the window, gulls call across the rooftops, and the wind smells of salt and sun-warmed figs. The city of Corinth hums below, but you are not listening to it. You are listening to your own heart, trying to find a rhythm steady enough to trust. You dip your pen once more, just to finish the last line. One more sentence, carved from longing, pressed into words that might never be read, but still you write. If I do not hear from you, I will still wait, until the olives bloom again, or until I forget how it feels to remember. You fold it, seal it with wax. A soft blue ribbon, tied once, then again. It smells of myrrh, of hope. You hand the letter to a merchant, leaving at dawn. A friend of a friend, sailing toward Rhodes with amphorae of oil and casks of salted fish. You slip it into his pouch like something sacred, whispering a name he promises not to forget. You watch the boat until it disappears, then you wait. Days stretch long in the heat. You walk through the agora with ears tilted toward strangers' conversations, hoping someone might say the name you wrote on the envelope. You check the docks, even when no ships are due. You leave the lamp burning by your window each night, a small golden flame against the wide, unknowable dark. And still, nothing. Weeks pass, the wind shifts, the olives bloom again. No letter comes. You try to write again. You begin with his name, Lysias, and then pause. The ink bleeds. The words don't come. What else can be said that you didn't say before? What else is left when silence has answered your longing? You never asked for much, just a reply, a word. Even a blank page with your name written across the top would have been enough. But the sea has its own rules, and sometimes love drowns. You are not alone in this. In Athens, archaeologists will someday find fragments, scraps of papyrus hidden beneath floors, preserved in dry tombs. Letters never delivered, messages never read. Pleas, poems, confessions. Some addressed to gods, others to soldiers. Many, like yours, simply signed with a trembling hand and a hope too fragile to carry. I await your word as the field awaits the rain. Come before the moon grows old. I will marry no one until I see your face again. These were not grand declarations. They were the daily bread of hearts that did not know what to do with silence. Once, long ago, a young woman in Delos sent 3 letters to a man she met only once. He had passed through the island with a caravan of performers. They spoke by a well. She remembered his laugh. She wrote him into her life. All 3 letters were found beneath the floorboards of a market stall. They were never opened. And still she wrote them, because sometimes the writing is enough. Sometimes the act of putting your ache into ink is the only way to breathe again. You no longer wait at the docks, but you still write, not to him but to no one. To the wind, to the sea, to the space beside your pillow that cools faster than it should. One night, you dream of him. He stands at the bow of a ship, letter in hand, calling your name across the waves. But the sea is loud, and your feet are heavy. You run, but never reach him. You wake with salt on your lips, and the silence remains. Still, you write. Because love, real love, does not always ask for answers. Sometimes it is enough to say, I remember, and to send that memory across the sea, even if it never comes back. If this story curled like parchment in your hands, give it to someone who's ever waited for a word that never came. Have you ever written a letter knowing it might never be read, and written it anyway? The sun is still low when the drums begin, low and slow like a heartbeat remembered from before birth. The temple of Artemis stands hushed in the forest's embrace, its columns wrapped in ivy, its courtyard swept clean by the hands of girls who rose before dawn. You walk among them not as priestess or pilgrim, but as something quieter, a daughter with no mother, a voice with no song. In your hand you carry a wreath of dried lilac petals curled at the edges, held together with a ribbon faded from years of sun. Today is the festival, but you are not here to feast. You are here to dance. No one asked you to. No one expected it. The others wear bright tunics, laugh as they braid flowers into each other's hair, murmur prayers to Artemis in sing-song tones. But you stand apart, barefoot, quiet, dressed in the same simple linen your mother once wore. She danced here, long ago. That's what your grandmother told you, in a voice thin with time, her fingers wrapped around the spindle, her eyes staring past you. She danced for your father. The year he returned from war, her feet bled that day. She smiled the whole time, and then she said no more. Your father never returned again. Your mother never danced again. And so, you came here, to the place she left behind. Not to reclaim her story, but to feel its echo beneath your skin. The courtyard fills, offerings are placed at the altar. Bread twisted into the shape of antlers, milk poured into shallow bowls, the soft bleating of a lamb offered with trembling hands. The high priestess raises her arms, and the girls form their lines. The first step begins, not with music but with breath. You do not join the line. You step forward alone. Heads turn. Whispers rise. You feel them glance toward the priestess, waiting for disapproval, for correction. But she does not move. She only watches. And so, you begin. The earth beneath your feet is cool, packed tight by centuries of dancers. You move slowly at first, letting the rhythm rise through your souls. You do not count. You do not follow. You remember. Your mother once spun in this same light. You imagine her younger than you now, her braid flying, her face lit with something wild and unafraid. She danced for love, for memory, for a future she would not live to see. You dance for her. Your arms move through air, thick with myrrh and old hymns. Your knees bend to the same rhythm that once guided generations of women whose names were never written down. You dance not to be seen, but to remember what was nearly lost. The others fall silent. The music changes. You spin, and somewhere in that turning, something lifts. A weight, a silence, a thread of grief too long buried. Your feet scrape the stone. Blisters bloom. Blood follows. You do not stop. Not because you are proving anything, but because your body has become the story. You are not a girl anymore. You are a vessel. A living offering. A prayer in motion. The wind catches your tunic. Your hair unravels. The wreath in your hand slips free and lands at the base of the altar, where the lilac petals scatter like ashes. You stop, and for a moment, there is only breath. The priestess steps forward, says nothing, but she kneels to pick up the wreath. She places it gently on the altar, beside the bread and the lamb and the bowl of milk, as if it belonged, and perhaps it does. The courtyard begins to stir. The drums slow. The other girls move forward. One of them, barely older than you, takes your hand. You walk together toward the steps. The blood on your feet begins to dry. You do not cry. You do not need to, because you came here with silence, and you leave with memory. Not yours, but inherited. Not loud, but rooted. In this temple, dances are not performances. They are language. And today, you spoke. What story would your body remember if your words fell away? The veil is thin today, a single layer of soft linen pulled across your face, barely hiding the outline of your lips, your nose, your eyes. And yet, it might as well be stone. No one looks directly at you, not the men walking past with scrolls under their arms, not the market boy shouting prices from behind his basket, not even the old neighbor who once knew your mother's name. You have become what is expected, a figure of modesty, silence, restraint. You are a wife now. Your name is not spoken outside the home. Your voice echoes only against kitchen walls and courtyard stones. You rise before the sun, prepare the bread, wash the child, manage the oil jars. You move like breath through the house, necessary, invisible. But inside, something burns. Love, in this house, is a quiet thing, if it exists at all. There are rules. You follow them. Your veil is drawn whenever you pass through the gate. Your eyes lowered in the presence of strangers. You speak only when addressed. You smile, carefully, when your husband's friends visit. You pour wine for them with hands that do not tremble. At night, you lie beside him, his body warm, steady, a presence you've learned to read like weather. Some nights he turns to you, some nights he does not. You stare at the ceiling, counting heartbeats, wondering if this is what love is supposed to feel like, or if it is simply what you've been taught to endure. But there is another life. You've built it quietly. A secret world stitched from fragments. You've embroidered a small bird into the hem of your robe, hidden just above your ankle. A bird that only you know is there. You've hidden folded notes in the cracks of the courtyard wall, poems written in code, addressed to no one. You've kept a lock of your mother's hair beneath the cedar chest. When you open it, the scent of thyme and beeswax rises like a memory too delicate to hold. And then there is him, the painter. You met him by accident, a commission arranged by your husband, a fresco for the dining room. He came with pigments and brushes, his eyes the color of dusk. He spoke only of the wall at first, of angles and balance, but once, while mixing ochre, he looked at you, not through you, at you, and something inside you opened like a wound. He said nothing improper. He never touched you. For that moment, the silence stretched between your eyes was enough. You walked away with your breath caught somewhere behind your ribs. You see him again weeks later, in the agora. He says your name, not loudly, not even with certainty, just a whisper, as if testing its weight. You do not answer. You lower your gaze. But that night, you write another poem, a short one, just 3 lines. You did not take my hand, but I still feel it burning. Even veils cannot shield a heart. You tuck it behind the olive jar. No one will read it. But that's not the point. In this world, where your name has become a whisper, and your body a vessel, love is not stolen in grand gestures. It is built in the quiet, in a glance, in a stitched bird, in words you never say aloud. You are not free. Not entirely. But you are not lost either. You are a woman behind a veil. A woman with fire in her chest, and poetry in her blood. And though the city forgets your face, the walls of your home know your story. And one day, perhaps long after you are gone, someone will find your verses, your threads, your hidden names, and they will know you loved. Not loudly, but truly. If this story stirred the silence in your chest, offer it to someone whose love lives where no one else can see. What would you weave into your life if no one could know your heart? The night drapes itself over the city like a velvet cloak, swallowing the narrow streets and quieting the market's last cries. You slip through the shadows, the rough fabric of a man's tunic pulled low over your shoulders, hiding the curve of your body beneath folds of faded wool. Your heart beats loud enough to drown the silence. Each step is careful, measured yet urgent. Tonight, you are no longer a woman bound by expectation. Tonight, you wear the freedom of a stranger. You move quickly past the flickering oil lamps, past the soldiers who watch the gates, their breath misting in the cool air. No one questions the figure they see. A young man perhaps hurrying home from the tavern. They do not see the girl beneath the guise, the hands trembling with the weight of stolen hopes. The city is alive with secret desires tonight, and you are not alone. There are others like you. Boys dressed as girls to slip unseen into women's quarters, carrying flutes to charm hearts closed tight. Women cloaked as men, their eyes sharp and steady beneath roughened cloaks, seeking the faces they dared not greet openly. Love, in this world, knows no law. It dances in disguise, hidden in the spaces where fear and hope intertwine. You find your way to a quiet courtyard, where the scent of jasmine mingles with the cool breath of the fountain. Waiting is him, the boy with the crooked smile and eyes like molten bronze. He does not ask why you came. He only takes your hand, warm and sure. His touch is a promise. Your voice is quiet, almost lost beneath the stone arches. You speak of things that cannot be named aloud, of longing pressed into hidden letters, of stolen moments beneath the moon's watchful eye, of dreams that cannot live in daylight. He listens, his fingers tracing patterns on your palm, as if mapping the journey between heart and flesh. But the city is not kind. Whispers trail like shadows. Faces once friendly now turn away. The law watches. Families judge. And yet, you return. Again and again, risking everything for this fragile thread of connection. The nights grow colder. The cloak no longer shields you from the chill of suspicion. One evening, you hear footsteps behind, the crack of a branch underfoot, voices raised in accusation. You run, breath ragged, heart pounding like war drums. The boy follows, pulling you into a hidden alcove beneath a tapestry of ivy. Your bodies press close, heat mingling in the dark. "You're brave," he whispers. "You're foolish," you reply, and you both laugh, a sound too wild for the city's cold judgment. In these stolen hours, love blossoms like a midnight flower, rare, fragrant, dangerous. You know the dawn will come, and with it, the masks must fall. But for now, you are free. And in freedom, you find yourself. If this story stirred the wildness in your soul, share it with someone who has ever dared to love beyond the lines. If love demanded you wear a mask, would you dare to dance anyway? The morning light is pale, as if the sun itself hesitates before rising. You stand beside the temple, its once proud columns cracked and grey, their marble surfaces worn thin by wind and sorrow. The air is thick with dust and silence, heavier than the weight of years. The sacred fires that once blazed beneath the altar have dwindled to mere embers, struggling to catch breath in the cold breath of change. You remember when the temple was alive, when women danced barefoot beneath its stones, their voices rising like smoke to the heavens. When the flame was a beacon, a heart beating steady in the dark. You were a priestess then, keeper of the fire, guardian of the ancient rites. You knew the hymns by heart. You felt the pulse of the city in your veins. The gods were close, so close you could almost touch them. But now, the gods have turned away. The new rulers bring laws, colder than marble, decrees that silence the chants and tear down statues, piece by piece. You watch as strangers in strange robes march through the streets, their feet crushing the symbols carved by your ancestors. The laurel branches are stripped from the altar, the incense crushed underfoot, the temple walls once echoing with prayer, absorb only quiet. You hold the last flame in your hands, a flickering promise against the gathering dark. You think of the lovers who once sought solace here, the women who whispered prayers for desire and healing, the men who knelt not in worship but in aching hope. You think of the children raised in the shadows of these stones, their lives shaped by the rituals now forbidden. A priestess steps forward, her eyes red from tears and resolve. She lifts her voice in a final hymn, low, steady, trembling, a farewell to the gods who once breathed life into these walls. Others join, their voices a fragile choir, holding fast to memory as the flames flicker and falter. You carry the fire away, through empty streets, past closed doors, into the night. The city sleeps, but you, for in the heart of every ending, there is a beginning. The fire may go out here, but it lives in the stories whispered beneath the olive trees, in the hands that light candles in secret rooms, in the beating hearts that still remember how to love. And one day when the stones have softened and the winds have shifted, the flame will return. Until then, you guard it quietly, a secret between shadows and dreams. If this story kindled a faint flame within you, pass it gently to someone who treasures the quiet resilience of love. What would you hold sacred, even when the world forgets? The sand slips through your fingers like time itself, fine and unyielding. You are a child again, barefoot on the sun-warmed shore, the salt air filling your lungs with each tentative breath. The waves lap quietly, retreating like whispered secrets, leaving behind shells and seaweed, tangled with fragments of ancient stories. Beneath your palm you feel something, a shape, small and cool, buried just beneath the surface. You dig with care, the grains falling like scattered stars, revealing a figure carved from ivory or bone. It is a woman, delicate and strong, her chest adorned with roses frozen in eternal bloom. You hold her close, marveling at the craftsmanship, the smooth curves, the tiny imperfections that tell of a hand guided by love and reverence. Who made her? For whom? And what did she mean in a world now swallowed by silence? The village elders say she was an offering, a prayer cast into the earth, to carry a wish beyond the reach of gods or men. Perhaps she belonged to a girl who loved fiercely and feared loss, or a mother who grieved too deeply to speak. Maybe she was once part of a wedding ritual, a symbol of hope bound in flesh and flower. You trace the roses with your finger, imagining the hands that carved them, the breath that warmed the workshop where she was born. The scent of pine and resin fills your memory, mingling with the salty tang of the sea. Somewhere beneath the waves, your ancestors watch and wait, their stories folded into every grain of sand. You carry the figurine home, cradling it like a secret. It becomes your talisman, a reminder that love endures beyond flesh and bone, that even when voices fade and cities crumble, the smallest pieces hold the loudest echoes. At night, you place her on the windowsill, where moonlight pools like silver water. You whisper your dreams into the darkness, and though she cannot answer, you feel her presence, a steady pulse beneath your palm, a promise that nothing truly vanishes. This is the legacy of love, in a land that knows both beauty and loss, the quiet remembrance carried forward by those willing to hold the fragile pieces, to cherish the dust, the broken, the forgotten. Because sometimes, the smallest gestures speak the loudest, and the simplest memories become eternal. If this story settled softly in your heart, share it with someone who treasures the fragments of forgotten love. What small memory would you carry to keep love alive? You walk slowly through the abandoned theatre, each step stirring echoes of a time when voices rose like wildfire and hearts beat in unison beneath the open sky. The marble steps are worn thin by centuries of footsteps, some steady, some hesitant, some fleeing in fear or rushing toward love. Dust drifts like forgotten dreams, settling in the crevices where once laughter and sorrow were shared with strangers and friends alike. The stage lies silent now, stripped of actors and chorus, but it remembers, beneath your fingers, the cold stone hums with stories, tales of passion played out under the relentless sun. You imagine the crowd, packed tight like swarming bees, waiting to be stirred, their breath held, their spirits tethered to words that could raise armies or break hearts. You sit on the edge of the orchestra pit, the scent of dry earth mingling with the faintest trace of incense, long extinguished. Here, love was no quiet affair. It was sung, shouted, performed, raw and unyielding. Lovers declared their devotion in verses crafted to outlast even marble. Rivals tore at each other with words sharp as swords. And beneath it all, the gods watched, their silent presence etched into every column and statue. You remember the story of a young actress who once played the role of a betrayed wife. Her tears were not acting. They were real, because on that day, her own heart was shattered by a lover who had promised forever. She poured her grief into her lines, and the crowd wept with her. The theatre did not forget. It held her pain, cradled it, made it sacred. The stones do not judge, they hold memory without bias. They do not ask if love was returned or lost, if it was pure or flawed. They only carry the weight of what was felt. The laughter, the whispers, the silences stretched between lovers who never found the courage to speak. You trace your hand along the weathered seat where a poet once sat, his fingers stained with ink and wine. He wrote verses of longing, of hope, of despair, not for kings or gods, but for the faces that haunted his nights. The stones remember his words. They keep them safe. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows, you rise and walk toward the exit. The theatre does not fade. It waits, patient and eternal, ready to hold the next story, ready to cradle the next heart. You carry its memory with you, a gift and a burden, because love, once spoken here, never truly dies. It lingers, it sings, it remembers. If this story stirred your soul like a song long forgotten, share it with someone who listens to the silence between words. What story would you tell if the stones themselves could speak? The dusk settles slowly, like a soft breath fading into the evening air. You stand alone on the cliffs, overlooking the Aegean, where the wind carries secrets older than memory itself. It weaves through olive trees, threads across crumbling temples, and slips beneath the folds of your cloak with a voice both distant and intimate. The scent of salt and pine fills your senses, a reminder that even the fiercest storms give way to calm. You close your eyes and listen. There is laughter in the breeze, light, fleeting, like the echo of a lover's whisper carried across time. There is grief too, a slow, steady ache, woven into the sighing of the waves. It speaks of those who loved without promise, who held on through silence, who burned bright and vanished like smoke. The wind does not carry words, exactly. It carries feeling, the raw, unspoken pulse of love that transcends mortal bounds. It remembers the hands that met beneath the laurel tree, the prayers whispered beside flickering flames, the letters sent across seas never answered. It holds the weight of stories lost and found, buried beneath dust and stone. You imagine the lives it touches, young women spinning poems under moonlight, warriors whose hearts beat fiercely beside their chosen, mothers who sang lullabies into the night, knowing their children might never see dawn. The wind is their witness, their keeper. As night deepens, the stars blink open, distant and indifferent. Yet, beneath their cold light, you feel warmth, a connection to something larger, something eternal. The wind stirs again, brushing your cheek like a remembered touch, a promise that love, in all its strange forms, never truly dies. You open your eyes. The world feels softer now, more whole, because even in absence, love whispers. Even in silence, it speaks, and you carry its breath within you. If this story stirred your spirit like a breeze on a still night, share it with someone who hears the echoes of forgotten love. What does the wind carry for you? Laughter, grief, or something else entirely? You stand once more beneath the ancient olive tree, its gnarled branches stretching wide like the arms of memory itself. The earth beneath your feet is soft, warmed by the sun and cradled by centuries of fallen leaves. The air is thick with the scent of resin and earth, a quiet perfume that speaks of life's persistence amid ruin. You are a stranger here, yet somehow not alone. You have walked this path before, through myth and madness, desire and despair, silence and song. Each step has carried you deeper into a world where love was never simple, where gods and mortals tangled in fierce embrace, where passion could be poison or prayer, blessing or curse. You have met the yearning of poets, the ache of widows, the courage of those who loved in shadows. Now beneath this tree you pause. The olive's leaves rustle softly, a lullaby, older than time. You close your eyes and feel the pulse of everything you've witnessed. The stolen glances, the whispered vows, the battles fought not just on fields but in hearts, the fire that burned in temple halls, the letters lost at sea, the dances danced alone but remembered by many. Love, you realize, is not a story with a neat ending. It is a living thing, messy, strange, enduring. It is the breath you take, the silence you keep, the flame you carry even when the temple fires go out. You breathe deeply, the wind catches your hair, lifting strands like pages of a book waiting to be read again. Was it worth it? You wonder. Every risk, every heartbreak, every desperate hope. The answer comes not in words but in the steady beat of your own heart. Yes, yes, it was. Because to love, truly, fiercely, without apology, is to be alive, to be seen, to be remembered. And as you open your eyes, the world feels vast and tender, full of stories yet to be told. You step forward, the path beneath the olive tree leading you home. Thank you for walking this journey through ancient loves, through echoes, shadows, and flame. May these stories linger softly in your heart. Subscribe if you wish to return, to hear the quiet histories waiting beneath marble and moss. If this story stayed with you like a whisper on the wind, share it with someone who cherishes the strange beauty of love's many forms. Was it worth it, all this loving? What would you risk to be remembered? Would you like to continue with anything else? And so, the wind still moves through ancient groves, and the shadows of strange, beautiful love flicker in forgotten corners. Thank you for walking with me tonight through a world where hearts burned without shame. Subscribe if you wish to return to hear the quiet stories that still echo beneath the marble. Until next time, rest well. What part of this story stayed with you the most? Could you have loved so deeply that reason no longer mattered? If you had lived in ancient Greece, what strange thing might you have done for love?